Thank you. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. My name is Isabelle. I'm a student here at Tulane. I'm studying math and English. And today I want to talk to you all about mathematical beauty and the aesthetics of data. So what do I mean by mathematical beauty? It's really not a new or underappreciated concept. In fact, we refer to it all the time. It's what we're talking about when we say a proof is elegant. It's how we describe fractal geometry in the Fibonacci sequence. And I've included a couple of definitions of mathematical beauty that I really like. The ever reliable Wikipedia defines it as the aesthetic pleasure typically derived from the abstractness, purity, simplicity, depth, or orderliness of mathematics. The 19th century mathematician John Joseph Sylvester called math the music of reason. And for sure, my favorite is this great quote from the mathematician Paul Erdos, who says, "I know numbers are beautiful. If they aren't, nothing is." So I've been really thinking about mathematical beauty basically nonstop for like 6 months now. And it all really started when I started interning at a children's library. And you might be thinking, children's library, where is she going to go with this? And I promise this will all connect back to mathematical beauty. Y'all just got to stick with me. So since August, I've been a virtual intern with the Young Reader Center, which is the children's library branch of the Library of Congress. In my work at the Young Reader Center, I look for patterns in the collection's data and I try to figure out which books are getting read. So when I'm evaluating books or larger sections of books, I pay attention to variables like circulation frequency, reading level, publication date, the identity of the protagonist, things like that. And this is just kind of what our online database looks like. Also, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, a good read. So I record this data, I analyze it, and I visualize it, and I end up with a bunch of graphs that look like this. Basically, I'm trying to use math to argue that books are important and deserve shelf space. And so in order to most clearly communicate this information in this visual way, through graphs, through charts, I spend a lot of time thinking about data visualization. And so when my amazing colleague, Peter DeCrane, heard that I was working on this data analysis project, and then I was starting to really think about things like data visualization, he pointed me towards an incredible series of graphs. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time today talking about them because I think they are possibly the most amazing example of mathematical beauty that I've ever seen. So before I really talk about the context of these graphs and how they were made, I just want y'all to soak in how interesting they are. When I first saw these graphs, I completely missed their context. At first, I was just overwhelmed by how gorgeous they are. The use of color, the shapes, the fact that a bar chart could look like a swirl. But then I started to soak in their context. These graphs were created by W.E.B. Du Bois, a civil rights activist, sociologist, historian, author, educator, poet, scholar, and yes, data scientist. We've all learned about this guy in a history class or read about him in a book, but his incredible infographics are sometimes overlooked. Du Bois created about 60 of these graphs during a very short period of time with the help of a team of students from Atlanta University. The graphs depict the social and economic development of the Black community in the United States and specifically the state of Georgia following emancipation. The team used data from the United States Census, the Atlanta University reports, and the United States Bureau of Labor. So W.E.B. Du Bois was creating these images for a larger exhibit at the 1900 Paris exhibition, which was a World's Fair that was held in Paris from April 14th to November 12th of the year 1900. The exhibition, with its focus on a white Eurocentric vision of modernity, was rooted in imperialism, colonialism, and racism. This was the very narrative that W.E.B. Du Bois wanted to counter with his infographics. Essentially, he wanted to use math to tell another story. The infographics were displayed alongside a gallery of photographs, as well as a collection of 250 publications by Black authors. Du Bois's exhibit won a gold medal from the Paris exhibition judges. So that's the historical context of these graphs, but I want to talk a little bit more about the design that went into them. These graphs were created at the tail end of what is sometimes called the golden age of statistical graphics. This was a period that lasted from about 1850 to 1900, and it marked an explosion of innovative artistic data visualizations. While the graphs from this period could be pretty Baroque, Du Bois was under a real time crunch in order to finish the graphs in time for the Paris exhibition. He needed to create something that was striking but simple. And years later, he was like writing about the difficulty of finishing these graphs in time. And he said, the details of finishing these 50 or more charts in colors with accuracy was terribly difficult with little money, limited time, and not too much encouragement. So his team chose these really bright colors to capture the attention of the fairgoers, but they also had to keep the graph simple so that the information they were conveying wouldn't get lost, and so that they wouldn't build this project that was too complicated to the point where they couldn't finish it in time for the actual exhibition. So now I want to take a closer look at these graphs. The top left graph turns what could have been just a standard bar chart into a stunning spiral graph. There's a lot of speculation with this graph in particular about possible influences. Scholars have said that Du Bois may have taken inspiration from Florence Nightingale's rose graph or William Playfair's original pie chart. I would recommend checking out both of those. They're both stunning. And in the top middle spot, we have this like really lovely nested circle graph. The colors used in this graph were specifically chosen to create this sense of gravity, like you're getting sucked into the center of the graph. And my favorite detail, I don't know if you guys can really tell when it's, this small, but the little slices, the edges of the slices were like intentionally drawn kind of ragged to evoke waves, to kind of add to that feeling of being like pulled in to the center of the chart. And then this one in the top left, top right, it's another bar chart, very nice. And this was the type of graph that Du Bois and his team most commonly used for this exhibit. Bar charts worked out really well for the team, given the time constraints they were under, because they had to put together all of these graphs in about, I think it was like 4 months. It was not a lot of time, and they had to hand draw everything. And so what's so interesting about this chart in particular was that the bars were scaled and arranged in such a way that they resembled the state of Georgia itself. Very cool. Bottom left is another spiral chart. This one I think is just kind of fun, just like kind of an interesting way of like showing this city and rural population information. And then the bottom right is a woven bar chart. And Du Bois selected this construction specifically to show how like the growth in the two cities was not like in a vacuum. Like the growth in both, I think it's, Savannah and Atlanta could be kind of like seen as corollary to each other, like maybe not causality, but definitely like a correlation. I think the reason that people, particularly mathematicians, are so in awe of these graphs is that they combine mathematical beauty with activism. They're evidence of the fact that mathematical beauty is everywhere, not just in the classroom or in our textbooks or in some far off theoretical realm. Mathematical beauty is quite literally all around us. And so to close out this talk, I want to turn it to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I would also love to hear about where in the world you see mathematical beauty.
Whoa, that's so cool, Isabelle.
Thanks.
Yeah. Can you go? Oh, sorry.
I just want to say I have a further reading slide in case anyone wants to dig into this, because there's quite a lot of cool literature out there about it. Yeah.
I definitely feel like there might be some mathematical beauty in maybe sports rankings or sports data. I feel like they play that in an interesting way.
That's a good one. Yeah. Another example that I was going to talk about, but it didn't really fit in with like the theme of this talk, was quilts. I love quilts. I think they're so beautiful. And I think that like just the formation of a quilt is like a tessellation. So there's that beauty of like, like the fabric fitting together in this really like specific calculated way, but also there's the beauty of like making something gorgeous out of just the scraps that you have, the scraps of fabric you have around your house. Totally, quilts are a good one. I'm going to go back to the graphs.
Yeah. Can we go to the bigger ones though? I kind of like want to see them again.
Totally. I'll full screen it too. So there are about like 60 of these graphs. I just chose these ones because I thought they were a good sampling of kind of the skill and the like artistic decisions that were made. You can see the like wavy edges there. It's very neat.
So I'm just curious about the gravitation interpretation. Is this like your interpretation or somebody else also like were?
Oh yeah, the scholars on like a couple scholars on Du Bois have said that that was the intention with the color selection. I don't have a direct quote from him, like from one of his like journals or biographies, but like there was a cool book that came out in about 2018, and it was really the first time that all these graphs were collected together in the same place. And you can, it's really interesting. It's at Howie T. So if people want to check it out, it is definitely out there. And they go graph by graph and talk about, you know, a little the backstory behind each graph, some of the decisions that were made. So for this one in particular, they talk about how color choice was super important with the yellow to the blue to the black.
Yeah.
This one I think is like really interesting, just with how they were able to scale everything.
Yeah.
I like that in a way the graphs are actually like visually simple. It's not like really complex and too many things to look at.
Absolutely. Yeah. They did like a really great job. And a cool thing too, like I'll go to the picture of the actual exhibition. It's hard to tell, but these were pretty large graphs. They were hand drawn and mounted on these plates, but like I think there's a picture out there of Du Bois sitting in front of this very like exhibition front, and like he looks tiny compared to like this big wall. But I think that like having these graphs be so colorful, like, and then to have the scale of them, I think really made an impression. And I can just go back to this kind of woven bar chart. It was funny because when I first saw these graphs, I didn't know, I was just like looking at the art and I didn't know where to place it in time because of how like modern they look. And like a lot of other people have had that same thought too, like that looks so chic and modern. And it's like, is it from like, just with the colors, you're like, when was this made? Was it like the 60s? Was it like a couple of years ago? Just with like the style. But it's interesting that there was this kind of grand age of data visualization, and it was when the form was like really young, you know, like from 1850 to 1900 about, you know, it's not one of those periods that has a very specific like start and end date. But at that time, like, I mean, the bar chart, I think, was really like, the bar chart as we think of it now was really like invented in like 1786. And then the pie chart was like 1801. So these were pretty new forms. And already there was all this creative stuff happening with them.